Hello, and welcome to our THF Conversations Farmer Spotlight, celebrating social innovators, industry experts, and trailblazers. I'm Debra Reid, Curator of Agriculture and the Environment at the Henry Ford, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jake Eisley, a sixth-generation farmer in Lenawee County, Michigan. Jake, thank you so much for having us here today and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me, Deb. I'm excited that you guys are here and looking forward to our conversation.
I'm eager to hear what your first memory of farming is.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, my first memory of farming actually has to do with when we used to grow tomatoes on the farm. So one of my first memories is actually riding the transplanter and actually exchanging out plants of tomato trays. When one got empty, I would take that tray away and then I would slide a new tray in so the workers could then continue to plant tomatoes going through the field.
Oh, you said the word transplanter. Does that mean your family raised the seedlings? Or
we did not.
Those...
Yeah, we did not raise the seedlings, so we got the transplants, and then we'd bring them up to the farm and we'd store them in a large transplant trailer. And then as we were going through the field, we were planting those small transplants into the field that then would grow and become the tomato crop that we'd harvest.
That may not be what people think about when they think about a Midwestern farmer's first memory, but agriculture is much more complex than we may realize. So how did you, fast forward years, how did you transition from being the son of a farmer, grandson, great-grandson, right, sixth generation, to being the farmer yourself?
So for me, really, agriculture is one of those things in my case that's just in your blood. I mean, I grew up on the farm. I grew up, really honoring this land and caring for the land, and really got to a spot where my role on the farm continued to evolve and more responsibility. And it's exciting now. I get the opportunity to farm, but I still get to farm alongside my parents as they're still involved in the operation as well. But, some of my fondest memories of growing up on the farm were when it was, my grandfather, my dad, and myself out working on the farm, completing a task. And then as I got older and continued to learn more about agriculture and about, agronomy, my role on the farm continued to expand. And here we are today, and I'm able to make more of the decisions.
So how have you put your own spin on your family operation?
I think about agriculture and our farm specifically about just kind of going through different transitions. Our goal is to continue to improve. One of the things that we've really started to implement as I came back and had a larger role on the farm is really started to implement a lot more technology and conservation practices. And for me, those two things go really hand in hand. Where we've moved into a spot where we're collecting data on every pass in the field. We're actually then utilizing that to make our in-farm and on-farm decisions as to, hey, where are we seeing results? And then also allowing that to help us better implement a lot of the conservation practices that we're utilizing on our acres.
You came back.
Yeah.
So that means you went somewhere.
Yeah.
Is a college education part of that transition to being a farmer?
Absolutely. In my case, a college education is what I came back from. So I went to Michigan State and I got my degree in crop and soil science, which is an agronomy degree. Learned a lot of that textbook material while I was there, but then how do I apply that in a hands-on way on the farm? And also helped me understand some things that I knew kind of in concept, but I didn't know the science behind it. From what I learned when I was growing up, having grown up on the farm, and then learning about it from more of a textbook standpoint, and really those met in the middle. So that's where I came back from, and as I came back to the farm, I knew I wanted to farm, and then I was able to start to implement some of those practices and some of those things I learned about while I was at Michigan State.
Conservation, sustainability, those are huge topics.
Mm-hmm.
How do you practice conservation and sustainability on your farm?
Yeah, to me, conservation and sustainability really go hand in hand. Conservation is about how do we conserve what we have, how do we be good stewards of the land, and then as we're good stewards of the land, that allows us to be sustainable so we can continue to sustain what we have and then also continue to use that for years to come. For us, sustainability can be seen in a couple different ways. There is what is environmentally sustainable. There is what is financially sustainable. And in our case, from a farm perspective, I always continue to have to farm in a way that's profitable, because if I'm not profitable, I'm not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really how do we create a system that involves conservation practices that we can build, and then how is that system as a whole sustainable from an environmental standpoint, water quality standpoint, but also from a business and a financial standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all things that we take into account when we think about what practices do we implement on the farm, and how do we continue to strive for improvement on our acres.
And you've obviously done a lot well, because your farm is one of the environmental farms. Could you tell me what that sign that indicates that you've attained that standard, what that means? And
in the state of Michigan, we have the opportunity to become MEEP certified, and farms can actually go through a checklist to understand if they are mitigating some of the environmental risks that are inherently can happen on farms. So we are MEEP certified within the state, along with many other farms. We're excited that that's a program that we have within the state to show that as farmers, we do want to do the right thing. We want to care for the land, and our farm falls into that. And then we have a lot of other sustainability and conservation practices that we've implemented as well on all our acres, which we're really excited about. So that's the MEEP program, Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program. So,
and that is a mouthful, and that does it justice.
Yes, which is why they
undertaking it is.
And they always call it MEEP certified, which is really how it's referenced across the state.
Well, congratulations on that. It
Thank
is
you.
a huge accomplishment, and trend setting and model building, right?
Yes.
This relates in a major way to one of the undertakings at the Henry Ford, and this is this Model I, or Model Innovator curriculum that we do. And it talks about habits of innovators and actions of innovation. One of the habits of an innovator is staying curious. So I can think of a dozen ways you need to stay curious, times 12, right?
Yeah.
But could you give a couple of examples of how your curiosity has really played a major role in your farming practices?
Really, the best way I describe our curiosity on the farm standpoint is one of our mottos is we don't know what we don't know. So that being said, we're always trying to figure out maybe what we don't understand, or what else can we implement that will help increase production, lower our fertility rates, or our applied fertility rates, because we don't know. We don't have this figured out. Farming is very complex. Every year we have a different set of variables to manage, and we also then get thrown some variables on top of it that we weren't expecting. So really, in our case, we're trying to have some foundational pieces that we have within our farm, but then we're always trying to adapt and learn new things. So that could be we're going to try different products. That could be we're going to try a different tillage system or a different set of cover crops, or we're going to try different seeding rate or a different planting date to really figure out what works well. And then as we find those trends of what historically works, we want to continue to utilize those practices on our operation.
And how do you learn those things?
It's really interesting how we learn those is we only get one chance. We farm one crop a year. So as we're learning these things, I learn something new every year. I'll learn small things throughout that year, but we learn them through, in our case, through the collection and utilization of data. As I mentioned as well, every time a piece of equipment goes across our acres, it's recording not only where it's at in the field, but what products it's applying, the rate that it's being applied at. I can go back and look at what was the historical fertility of that field, what's the soil fertility of that area of the field, and then I can, at the end of the year, I get a yield map, and I can start to figure out, what's driving that yield or how that area of the field was performing based on what product was planted there, what was applied, what was the fertility rate, to figure out, what combination of practices and products is really helping drive that. And that's different for this field than it is for the field down the road. And it's really understanding and putting that piece of those puzzle pieces together to figure out what works. So it's through that combination of data and then technology and then a lot of analysis at the end of the year.
That sounds to me like precision agronomy.
Yeah.
I've heard you described as a precision agronomist.
Yep.
Yes. Did you take to that like a duck to water by chance?
I definitely enjoy that. For me, it's about that puzzle. And that's part I stay curious as well is, okay, I did this last year. How can I get better? How can I continue to find a better way, build a better mousetrap per se? And it takes the time to understand how are we collecting that data at the beginning, because my season starts, I'll be putting fertility on for next year's corn crop as soon as this year's soybeans are harvested. So it's almost a continuous cycle of there's no downtime to say, hey, let's get this figured out. I mean, it's always one thing after another. And I take to that idea of putting these puzzle pieces together and what can I adjust a little bit to get a better outcome for next year. And that's not just from a yield standpoint. That's also from a conservation standpoint. How can I better utilize, cover crops? Maybe there's some challenges that came with that. Okay, can I tweak this to have more success with that? Can I reduce my fertility rates because I have, a lot of fertility in the soil already? I mean, there's just a lot of things that happen at the subfield level or at the acre level that we can utilize to be able to make sure that we're continuing to make those improvements.
When you say reducing fertility rates, you're talking about lower inputs because the soil's fertility or nutrient level is high. Am I understanding that
absolutely.
correctly?
So one of the things we do on our farm is all our farm, like many others, the soil gets sampled. And then as that soil sample gets back, we get an idea of how much nutrient is available in that soil. And then that allows us to drive, how much do I need to add to be able to, achieve the crop that I want to grow. So in these areas of the field where I maybe have higher soil nutrient levels, I don't need to apply as much there because it's available there. The other thing in our case, from a fertilizer is expensive. That's an input that is a major cost to farmers. I don't want to put on more than I need. Just like, it doesn't make sense to buy 5 gallons of milk at the grocery store if I'm only going to drink 1. I'm just going to buy 1. So we're always monitoring that, our soil fertility levels, and then how does that tie into what our fertility applied should be? And then taking that, and we're able to track that to yield to see if there is benefit or disadvantage to those rates.
So this takes a lot more time than you probably have time to do when you're in the middle of a planting or harvest cycle. So could you give our listeners a bit of an idea about what a year in the life of Jake Eisley is?
Well, that's a big question. Probably something my wife should be involved with as well at that point in time. But for us, from a farm standpoint, our next year's crop, as I said, starts right after the current year's crop is harvested. That's when we start and we actually make that main fertility pass. We're putting fertility down for the next year. All that fertility goes in the ground, so it's not subject to, wind or water erosion. We're putting that in the soil. But it's also then in the spring, you're planting, you're making applications, whether that be for pesticides or other fertility applications with the planter. You're doing a lot of crop protection throughout the summertime months, whether that would be to control weeds or disease or other insects that might be detrimental to the crop. And then really as we get into fall, it turns to harvest. And we're harvesting that crop, and hopefully throughout that growing season you had favorable weather, and conditions were conditions were favorable to be able to have a bountiful harvest, because we put a lot of input in that crop in the ground hoping that the weather's going to cooperate, that we'll have something to harvest in the fall. And then it starts all back over again. Once that crop's harvested, we start with fertility for the following year's crop and continue on as such. So that's very simplified, but in there as well, there is that decision making, there's that data analysis, there's that planning that goes into it. On top of buying inputs and crop protection and fertility and what else needs to happen from a business perspective.
Risk management.
Risk management, yes.
Trying to optimize. So could you summarize briefly what you think a good strategy you have to optimize your situation?
Optimizing in the farm can be as simple as making sure as we're planning out our path for the day that, okay, I'm going to go plant this field and then this one's on the way and I'm going to plant that one. And it's just that use of, I don't want to drive from A to C to then drive back to B. There's simple things like that. But for us, I think the most optimization comes around that nutrient piece. It's understanding how much fertility is available in that soil and then how much do I need to add, if any, to optimize the return of that fertility level. So it's that optimization of, I don't want to put on more than I need, but I also don't want to put on less than I might utilize, because then I'm going to have a disadvantage from a yield standpoint. So it's really optimizing that fertility use or that fertility dollar to make sure that I'm getting the most benefit from either the right amount of input. I won't say minimal input, because in some cases we can have higher fertility levels or add additional fertility, and I'm going to see a distinct advantage from a yield standpoint. So that optimization of how we utilize that fertility that we have historically and then what we're going to apply is really where we see that optimization piece. And the nice thing about that as well, that then feeds into conservation and sustainability, because if I over-fertilize, there's a higher risk that some of that fertility might go away. It's going to be lost in groundwater. I want to optimize that, because I have no desire to have that fertility that I've purchased go into the water or go down the stream. I want that to be utilized. We put that on the field to be used by the crop, so we have crop to harvest, and then we can help, stock the shelves of the grocery store and put food on the table for everyone.
An aspect of that is controlling the water drainage system on your fields.
Yes.
Which is also an aspect of this precision agronomy.
Yeah, as we think about drainage water management, one of the things we do is we actually have structures on many of our fields. We're able to control and hold some of that excess water back, and utilize some of the natural filtration that happens within the soil. I don't want that water to go away or to take nutrients with it. We get to spots where we're going to hold that water back, because it's going to help reduce that nutrient load within that water, and then also make that water available to our crops throughout the season when we're going to go through a dry spell at some point in time. We want to have that water there so we can use it. And
you use technology in many ways
Yes.
that may be hard to understand. I'm anxious to hear what machines you think are most critical to what you do.
Yeah, so as we think about technology and we think about machines, farm machinery is expensive. It costs a lot of money to have big pieces of machinery out in the field. They're all critical. We don't want to have anything that isn't critical, and I don't want to buy anything that's in excess. I don't just have a spare tractor at home just in case I need it, because it's too much of a capital investment. From a technology standpoint, though, probably the thing that's really unique is every piece of machinery has a monitor in it, has a GPS globe on top, and then that's collecting every acre, in some cases multiple times a second, what that piece of machinery is doing. It's kind of unique. We've talked about, self-driving cars have really become a big topic of conversation as we think about that. We've had self-driving tractors in the ag world for quite a while. Pretty much everything for us has auto steer, so I can say, hey, if I want to farm this 30 foot and I want to drive back in that same 30 foot, I can do that with GPS technology. That monitor also is what's collecting the data that I will then analyze throughout the season and at the end of the year to be able to help make some of those decisions. So it's this combination of the monitors in the cab and collecting that data, and then having a system that I can put that data into to do a lot of that analysis.
Many, many layers of machinery.
Yes.
Many layers of technology.
Yeah, layers of technology from, obviously I have to have a planter, I have to have a sprayer for crop protection standpoint, and I have to have a combine to be able to harvest that crop. Each one of those has a piece of technology in it to collect that information as it goes across the field.
Yeah. Farmers have to wear many hats. I wonder how many you wear at any given time.
Oh, that's a really good question. Of course, it depends on the weather, what hat I'm going to wear most of the time. But for me, the first hat I wear when I wake up is as a husband and as a father. That's the biggest thing I can do is not only am I raising crops, I'm raising my family and want to continue, hopefully, if my kids are interested, to continue on this legacy that we have from a farming standpoint. But a lot of those hats outside of that, and as we think about farm, it could be, some days I'm a weatherman because I'm trying to figure out if it's going to rain or not today, and if I should go to the field. Some days I'm a mechanic, if I'm working on something. Some days I'm working at the car wash because we're washing equipment. Some days I'm a data analyst because I'm sitting at the computer analyzing the data. Some days I'm all of those things wrapped up into one. Farmers deal with so many different variables. We have to be flexible enough to understand what the best decision is. And in some cases, the best decision or what the best thing is the decision you make, and then things change and it wasn't the best decision. But farmers are everything from mechanic, as I said, they could be an electrician because they're dealing with electronics, they're dealing with, data. There's just so much, there's the whole agronomy side of it, that scientist of understanding, hey, what's happening? There's a disease in this field. How do I go out and diagnose what it is? All of those things at some point in time, multiple points of time throughout the growing season come into play.
If we can think forward a month or month and a half to soybean harvest, could you paint a picture of what the soybean harvest is going to be?
Well, hopefully successful, but as we think about what it's going to look like, as we look at the beans behind me, all the leaves will have turned brown and dropped off. The beans will actually look, the plants will look very brown in color, and then the soybeans will actually be in small pods on those bean plants. And those soybeans. Those pods will also be brown. As we pull in here with the combine, we'll actually pull the combine in. The head will be separate. We'll hook that soybean head up to that combine. We'll get it turned around, make sure everything is ready to go on the machine, make sure our monitor is ready to collect data, and then actually, start into this field. We'll start and we'll go all the way around the field. We'll cut the headlands off, and then we'll start and we'll harvest the center section of the field, and there'll be a semi-truck here to take the beans to town and a grain cart here to be able to help keep that harvest efficient. So a harvest is just that special time of year where you get to experience kind of the fruits of your labor, where you get to harvest that crop that you've started back in April or May or beyond that, planning for prior to that, where a lot of that hard work that you've put in starts to pay off, and say, hey, I have raised this crop and now I'm in a spot where I actually get to utilize that and then take it to town and sell it. So that soy is then used those soybeans used for a lot of different purposes. But that's that time of year where it's that culmination of all the hard work you put in throughout that entire growing season.
So are these beans sold before they leave the pod, or are you putting them into a storage or drying bin before sale? Yeah,
so some of them we have the opportunity to contract sell some beans ahead of time. Some of these beans are sold. The vast majority of them at this point in time are not sold. These will go, we do store some beans in the bin. We've done that historically. A lot of these beans will go to the local elevator, not necessarily to be sold right away. Maybe they'll be stored at the elevator for a time, and then we'll sell them, hopefully when the market is at its peak, which is unlikely to happen.
That's what storage is about.
That's right.
Is it a co-op storage facility, or?
In this case, it is not a co-op storage facility. It's Michigan Agricultural Commodities, which is a Michigan-based grain storage and grain elevator here in the state. So we're fortunate to have a location just about 5 miles from here. So it makes it very convenient for us.
And all this time you're looking for information from the Michigan Soybean Committee, right? And helping share that information with your peers.
Well, absolutely. We're excited to be able to partner with Michigan Soybean Committee to do some in-field trials, to be able to learn, hey, how can we continue to improve soybean production within the state? And they do a tremendous amount of work for us as farmers as well, from a marketing and then really exploring new ways that we can use soybeans to, have new use for the bean. It's amazing how versatile the soybean is, whether it's crushed and they feed meal, or they're crushed and we use the oil to be able to make so many different products today.
Remember when we mentioned staying curious? And if our listeners are curious, what would you recommend they do to learn more about this crop, soybeans?
As I think about listeners being curious, the best thing you can do is find a farmer. Ask them their story. The vast majority of them are very passionate about what we do, and we all farm differently. The way I farm is not the way the neighbor farms or his neighbor farms. We all have a different set of challenges and a different set of machinery or variables that we're dealing with. But at the end of the day, we're all passionate about what we do because it is a job, it is work, absolutely. But the vast majority love us, love it, and we want to be able to share that story. So find a farmer. If that's me, have at it. Vast majority of farmers, if you want to go ride in a combine, stop at the edge of the field, say, hey, I want to ride, and they'll probably wave you up and say, come ride along. And ask questions. And just don't make assumptions. Food just doesn't show up in the grocery store. A farmer somewhere raised that crop. In this case, whether, we're raising corn and soybeans, but that goes into, feed livestock or be able to make products. But same ways we think about fruits and vegetables and meats. A farmer somewhere raised that crop, and then we're able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, as food.
You are amazing and inspiring. So if listeners are interested in thinking about agriculture on their own, what kind of advice would you give them?
If you're interested in agriculture, try it. It doesn't have to be on a large scale. It could be something small. It could be, hey, I'm going to try to raise a garden in my backyard. You can do that. I'm going to be out, try some chickens and have some farm fresh eggs. Be curious enough and be willing enough to try. That's what I could say to anybody that was really interested in agriculture. And then there's a tremendous amount of resources out there. Go on, read, see what you can find. And if all else fails, like I said, find the farmer down the street or a few miles down the road. Ask them what you can learn and ask them if you can ride along. Your
story is inspiring. Perhaps you act as a mentor?
Hopefully I'm worthy of mentoring some folks, but I think for me, one of the things, I like to share my story. I like to allow people to understand what we're doing, allow them to kind of look to see what practices we've implemented, how we farm, the system that we've built, but then openly acknowledge what works for us might not work for everybody else. What I hope people can take away is from what we've done is the courage to try something new, the courage to try something a little bit different. And that's where has really got us to where we're at, because I don't want to farm the same way that my grandfather farmed, because the variables that he had to deal with and the equipment that he had is very different than what we have today. We want to continue to improve, and that improvement, the vast majority of time, comes through new practices. But sharing that story in our case is something that we don't want to keep it to ourselves. If I learn something or we find, hey, something that works, let's share it and be open about sharing that with others, neighbors, and also others that aren't involved in the farming community.
As a curator of agriculture and the environment, we do have some, you might think, antiquated technology, but I believe there are still powerful stories to learn from that.
Absolutely.
But you've really done a good job of helping us realize that this is a building block and a stair step from past practices to addressing current scales of production and doing your best at it.
Absolutely. Agriculture is a progression. We continue to learn, we continue to make improvements, and we wouldn't be where we're at today with the history and the ways that we used to do it in the past. And I hope, 20 years from now, we're doing it more efficiently. We're continuing to optimize. We're continuing to be curious. Those things are just going to continue to move agriculture forward and to continue to provide, a very reliable and affordable food source that we are able to enjoy here in the United States.
If you could share your farming experiences with anyone, who would that person be?
Yeah, if I could share some experiences I have on the farm, for me, I had probably my grandfather. And for me, it's because I had years where I was able to share that experience with him, but really in a spot where I was learning from him and the practices that he had. And then after he passed, I'm able to share those experiences now with my father and have the opportunity to share some of those farm experiences with my son. I think it would be just amazing to have 4 generations on the farm to be able to do that. And then also to be able to share some of the big improvements that we've made within the last 10 years with my grandfather, and thinking about what he grew up with, when he was, did a lot of work with horses in the fields, or, open station tractors, to now where we're at today and the scale that we're able to farm, but not the scale just in terms of the acres and the size, but the way we're able to better manage what we do on a farm standpoint, whether that be from fertility or seeding or planting, to then really what that means in terms of results. I can't imagine, if he was riding next to me in the combine as we harvest that, and he could see just the progression that we've continued to make on the farm as we continued to improve from where he was at. And he did a good job. He was a very good farmer to now where we're at today by implementing and making some of those changes and some of those advancements in agriculture.
I'm sure he'd love to hear about it too. Yeah. See how things have changed.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? In 50 years?
Yeah, well, so my grandpa was born in 1919 is when he would have been born, so it would have been the same year that his father actually bought one of our first farms that's now been in the family for over 100 years. And I had a brief moment of that with my other grandfather. I remember him riding in the combine with me. He'd look over and say, well, what are these beans running? Or what's that corn yielding? And he was just amazed when I told him, well, no, it's yielding, over 200 bushel. Yeah. No. Yeah, it is, and just to be able to have that time. But I wish I could continue to share that with him as well.
Thank you so much for taking time, sharing your story with us. We very much appreciate it.
Absolutely, Deb. I'm happy to do it and happy to partner with the Henry Ford to be able to help share this story of agriculture.
And thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we invite you to explore our collections of agricultural artifacts and stories at the Henry Ford in Dearborn, Michigan, and at THF.org. There you can learn about other leaders, innovators, inventors, and entrepreneurs who inspire us every day.